Hi Vivian, thank you for joining me on Connecting Women Who Break Barriers. I'm super excited to have you here and would love to learn more about compassion with you. So would you like to give us an intro?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's really nice to be here and talking about this awesome topic. So I'm Vivian. I work as a mental health nurse 3 days a week at a private hospital and running group therapy, so big compassion focus in that.
Yep.
And I work part-time as well in my own business and then across for some studios as well, teaching meditation and mindfulness, which has been a really nice, plant that's been blossoming in my life.
Nice. And what do you like to do outside of all this amazing work that you're doing?
Yes, when I'm not working. No, I really enjoy spending time with Billy. She's at the moment my 6-month-old border collie. Training her in just obedience, which she's very good at, by the way, but in agility and getting her ready for all the fun stuff. So love spending time with her. And then I really enjoy listening to podcasts while cooking or just like getting out in nature, hikes. I really enjoy camping. Would love to make some more space for it in my life. And reading, I've just really enjoyed fiction at the moment. Just finished reading Trent Dalton's Lola in the Mirror. Can recommend.
Very nice. And what about music? Is there a song that you like or something that you resonate to?
My favourite go-to song has always been Ellie Goulding, Anything Can Happen. It is just such a vibe. No matter what mood you're in, it will just pull you out of that and just get you really excited. And I think it also speaks to this, I suppose, the truth in life, really anything can happen. And so just kind of, to embrace things and also lean into overcoming fears. And just, anything really can happen, but it's just such a banger.
Yeah, indeed. I do love it too. And when it comes to music, I believe that a lot of the music gets us out of this stuck zone that we may be in. And it's like, no, actually, I'm all right.
Yeah.
And I've got my own back. I just needed a minute, right? I love that song.
That's okay.
So we're going to have a very candid conversation. And it's something for our viewers and our listeners to be mindful of that. There may be some really big aha moments, but there may be some moments where, you might need a tissue or you might just feel something. And, my recommendation to you is feel all the feels, because there's nothing wrong in whatever we're going to be sharing. It is part of our life and it's a story of our life as well, right? So I'm sure there's going to be things that we both, have in common or that we can really connect with. But for me, I'm a wellness coach as well. So compassion is something that I'm super interested in and something that I have a lot of an understanding about, but I love hearing about it from you. And just want to quickly share. So I met Vivian doing a few different activities and workshops with her, and I loved her vibe, and that's why I really wanted her to be on the podcast with us, because compassion is one thing that when you lean into it, it's a game changer. However, it takes time to actually lean into it, because when you're going through something and you're stuck in that funk, compassion is the first thing that we think about. So I just want to start with that there. How did you get into this space of compassion?
I love telling this story because it's not a space I think that a lot of people closest to me at the time would have thought I would have gone into. I remember my mum even saying, she's like, wow, I didn't know that you were like this. So I did my meditation teacher training in 2021, and in that I remember one of the teachers, mentors, was talking about Tara Brach's work, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm a bit familiar with Tara Brach. And then she went on to talk about mindful self-compassion, like the work of Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer. So I went away, did some little research, bought Kristen Neff's book, read it, devoured it, and then was like, I think that this is what I was supposed to do in my lifetime. I think that this is what I was put on earth for, is to practice this for myself and then take my experience and I suppose give others permission to just try it on for size, this compassion thing. Okay, great, it's actually enhancing my life and my relationship with myself and other people. So why not? Let's bring it in. So I then went on to do my mindful self-compassion teacher training. It's quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
And in that, they make you do the program for yourself initially. And then when you are actually doing the teacher training, you're doing it again alongside the teacher training.
Yep.
So you kind of have this experience of being, you know, the learner and the facilitator. And I just, like, albeit like some things became a little harder, because as is with any attention enhancing practice like mindfulness, you know, you start to kind of get clued in on certain habits and things that you do, and it's like, oh, I never even realized all this stuff before. So there's certainly difficulties, but for the most part, like, all that work in self-compassion and compassion has set me free, like free from suffering.
Beautiful.
Doesn't mean that I don't have tough times. Everybody has tough times. It's set me free. So yeah, not long after that, I brought it into the hospital that I work for. So we now host that every term, and I start doing it by myself as well, like as my own business. So
yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as you said, sometimes there is a tipping point or something where you're like, I didn't really know that much about myself until now, when I've, you know, taken the moment to really understand who I am. And did that lead you to be more compassionate towards yourself and others?
Yes, definitely more myself, because I've always been the type of person, and I knew that this, I suppose, that niceness muscle was being flexed through meditation. I'd become a lot more self-aware.
Yeah.
And you know, I was somewhat compassionate. I mean, we're all compassionate by nature. Everyone is a good person by nature. I realized very quickly that the standards that I'd hold for myself versus what I held in the outside world were very different. It was quite polarizing. And then when I really started to do the work, what I actually found was, if these are the standards that I'm holding myself, to some degree, I'm actually holding that for other people as well. So my compassion kind of came with, like, circumstance or condition, and that's what's really unraveled in the best way and changed over time. So that's why I say it's just like, it is actually just a life-changing practice.
Nice.
When you get to the heart of it. And like you said before, it takes time. It absolutely takes time to cultivate.
I just want to touch on one thing that you said there. So you mentioned that, you know, all of us by nature are good people.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, you know, as a listener, you might think about, I'm not sure about that, right? And that's where, again, like, having some awareness and some understanding of compassion and acceptance becomes important.
Yeah.
Even if you just think about yourself, like, no one gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to be mean today.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's not the first thought that you have, right? Everyone's, you know, thoughts are like, I want to have a good day, and I'll, you know, my intent is to be a good person. But the things that we go throughout our day can really change that initial thought that we might have had, or that initial intention that we had for the day. Where you're like, no, I'm going to be a good person, and then something happens, you're like, what happened to that feeling, right? It kind of goes out the window. Yeah, exactly. So is there an example of something that you'd like to share that maybe you've been through recently and how you navigated that?
So the timing of this podcast couldn't be any more timely. I suppose something that I've really, I think where I'll start is something that I heard from a fellow meditation teacher when I was first starting out, was everyone's doing the best that they can with what they have at the time and what they know, right? Like, when we say what they have, we mean capacity, knowledge, experience, all of that, right? And I was like, yeah, but, you know, there was always a bit of a but. So I was definitely that person that was kind of skeptical. But what I have come to learn through mindfulness and compassion work and self-compassion work is that, truthfully, everyone is just doing the best that they can with what they have at the time. And that's why I said before, everyone by nature is good. Like, everyone is inherently good. And yes, it is these experiences throughout our lifetime, and just even those moments during the day that just throw us off our axis, that it just changes things a little bit. And I think for me, the most recent experience has been a relationship ending. And you know, I'm not going to sit here on my high horse and say that I never experienced anger or resentment or bitterness or all of the, you know, the unpleasant stuff, because that just wouldn't be true.
Yeah.
There was a period of time there where I was very angry, very resentful, bitter, and sad. I reached this place through, essentially, it was through acceptance and compassion. They have to work together.
Yeah.
I mean, I could sit here and argue that compassion has to come first, but really for the most part, they come together. So acceptance is just letting reality be as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the same as allowing. So it's not allowing poor behavior, or it's not enabling, I suppose, it's not enabling poor behavior, or even in yourself or others.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about that at all. Acceptance is just going, oh, okay, well, this has happened. And it's a gateway. Like when we do that, when we drop the resistance, because that's the opposite of mindfulness and acceptance. Resistance is denying reality, or wanting to push things away, or mold it to be something else that it's not. So, oh, it should have been this way, or I wish I had done. That's not reality. Like, sweetheart, you're beating yourself up for nothing. And so for me, in this sort of most recent example in my life, is relationship coming to an end, it was actually just one day practicing radical acceptance of like, well, this is how it is. And you can keep either pushing a rock up a hill, which that rock you can't change being another person. You can't change anyone. Or you can keep, you know, just pushing yourself and exhausting yourself to the point of exhaustion and resentment, anger, bitterness. Or you can put your hands up and just go, okay, well, this is what it is. So what next? Yeah. And the compassion element for me was having my own back, in that the what comes next, don't be afraid of it, you know, and also give yourself permission to decide what comes next for yourself. Like, it is your life. Trust that that's come from a really wise mind place. And I think that I suppose, in summary, the compassion element for me is really just being on your own side. Because as much as people will say, I'm there for you, and that will be true, the only person who's 100% going to be there for you is you. Yeah. And you have to be comfortable with your decisions. You have to wake up in the morning and love how you live, the way that you work, the way that you engage with other people. You are entirely responsible for your happiness. And yes, people will come in and, I suppose, make additions to that, you know, light up our lives, and others might not, but you are, at the end of the day, responsible for your happiness. And that's fierce self-compassion, I think, when you can push beyond those barriers of fear and go, well, this is actually what I want for myself. And I accept that this is what it is, that I can't change people, or I can't change this, but I can change this for myself. That's the power that I do have. I suppose where I land with that is, here you have two people who didn't work out. This person's trying their absolute best with what they have, what they know, as am I. Yeah. And we're all going to be okay.
Exactly, right. And, you know, thank you for sharing so openly with us, because I know that will resonate with a lot of our viewers and our listeners. But essentially, there's things that we're going to go through in life. And whatever we go through, the important takeaway that I have from you is we're going to be okay. There will be people who will meet along on this journey called life. But essentially, having our own back is so important. And that's where compassion becomes a really important part of our life, because, you know, again, like yourself, you were doing the best that you could, and with the knowledge that you had. And I'm sure there's learnings, you know, for both people involved, or there's learnings even in a circumstance where there's not another person involved. But when you come back to saying, okay, well, I did my best and I tried my best. Yeah. And that's what, you know, we're here to do, right? Where still the intent is to be a good person and to leave on good grounds. And yes, the sadness and the anger and all those feelings that we feel are important to also feel, because I think one of the restrictions or the mindsets that we have is, but don't be angry and don't feel all of these other things that, you know, are kind of considered bad, if I can use that word. But it's like, unless you feel those feelings, it's hard to get to a point of compassion. And I mean, I was thinking actually before, I'm like, oh, it's probably good to just go over what the essence of compassion, because a lot of people think it's like,
oh, I know how that person feels. And it's, yes, there's a bit of empathy in there, but compassion is to actually see difficulty. Like if we're to take the word compassion, it's to see difficulty in another and respond with kindness and understanding. And the thing that sets it apart from empathy is that, yes, there's a wish to alleviate this person's suffering, but we don't actually have to jump in their boots. We don't have to jump in our boots to understand that that's difficult. We can actually, as a human being, connect with, you're telling me you feel sad. I've known sadness, because all of these emotions are universal across the human condition. And so I don't actually have to place myself in your situation to understand that. I can just see it. I see you and I hear you, that this is hard.
Yeah.
And when we talk about self-compassion, it is the exact same thing, but towards ourselves. And, you know, this acceptance and compassion, like they're such a beautiful pair. And this is where I'll argue compassion comes first. In that it can be really hard to accept life as it is if we're not actually responding to ourselves with genuine kindness and, the key being, understanding. And the willingness to alleviate suffering. So we're all going to experience painful events across our lifetime, like you said. But we don't have to suffer. The suffering is all the judgments and the kind of these distorted perceptions and just all of the stuff that we kind of add onto our experience that we just don't need. It doesn't matter. And that's where we arrive at acceptance. It's just like, well, what's actually here? Oh, it's sadness. Okay. You're feeling sad today. That's okay. And maybe that's just compassion in itself, is like, oh, that's okay. Or it's, what do you need? You know, and this is all like an internal dialogue.
And I think, you know, the internal dialogue is sometimes a negative Nancy. Or it can be something that's, you know, going to be empowering, right? And that's where I love talking about compassion with you, and why I wanted to start off in that space is because compassion can be really empowering. And when we talk about empowerment, it's actually about bringing yourself into a place where you've got a choice on how you handle the situation and how you respond to the situation as well. And yes, at a point in time you might have felt sad or angry or upset, but then it's a matter of deciding, well, how long do I want to continue feeling that way for? And the acceptance then, as you said, you know, they go hand in hand, compassion and acceptance. It then allows you to be like, okay, well, I've felt all the feels, but I don't want to feel like that forever, right? I want to actually enjoy my life and move on in the best way that I can. And there may be days where you go back and forth in those feelings, but really it's a matter of saying, let's give it a go. You know, let's be a little bit more kinder towards ourselves. As you said, that understanding and kindness is critical. So in our prep for this podcast, one of the things that you mentioned was from an early stage in your life, choice was something that you felt you could connect with. Do you want to just share that a little bit? Because I feel that one of the misconceptions that a lot of people tend to have or can have is that, but the choice is not mine. Well, the choice is mine, but I don't know what to make. 100%.
It's like perpetual stuckness.
100%. So let's explore.
So when we were doing this prep, I'll get there in a roundabout way. I've always considered myself to be a late bloomer. So I finished high school. I was 17, so I couldn't even like enjoy schoolies like everyone else. It was a bit sad. But I finished school, and then I went to all the register for uni and all that kind of stuff, and right there and then I was like, no, I want to take a break, like I'll take a break. And then I went back after a gap year. I saved some money, spent it, saved some more money, spent that, and then eventually went to uni. Never really kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I suppose it's kind of where it's said in this like message of, oh, you're just always a late bloomer. Everyone else is finishing uni and then going to get their jobs, and then you're like, you don't know what you're doing kind of thing. But really this element of choice was like, well, I could figure out what I want to do. I suppose I could stick to this timeline that, and do you know what? I don't even want to blame society. I think like, yes, just because everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people seem to be moving in the same direction, doesn't mean that we should actually blame that movement either.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, okay, I could follow along others' footsteps and do this timeline, or I could just enjoy what I have, and this is the choice element, right? Like, here I am. I could just keep moving with everyone else, or I could do my own thing, and there's so much more of my life ahead of me for all of that. And so yeah, I went and worked as a travel agent and traveled a lot, and
love it.
made more money and spent more money, and made it back, spent it again, and I saw a lot of the world. And then I eventually settled back into uni, into my nursing degree, and I had so much more appreciation for it because it was on my own time and my own interest. And little did I know, I think what a lot of what was getting me through that was a lot of fierce self-compassion. It's okay that you're not doing things like everybody else. It's okay that you do this. And I know that there was definitely the negative Nancy in my head who was like, why can't you just be like everyone else?
Yeah.
Like, why can't you just do the timeline thing? Look, everybody else is now starting to save deposits for houses and you don't have that. Like, I suppose that this choice element, here you are, there's always going to be this kind of fork in the road. You notice the annoying voice, or you notice the pressures from other people, or whatever it may be. You don't have to lean into that. Like, there is always another option, and that is to, what I phrase, hold yourself lightly, be compassionate with yourself, or be kind. And really, I think just, I suppose, leaning into that without the awareness that that's what it was. Leaning into that is always what has got me through. And I think even this time around, like with this most recent life struggle, I felt like for a moment, I was like, I feel like I don't have any options. I actually even remember saying to someone, I feel like there are no doors. There's no doorways. I just can't see. I can't see anything beyond said room of my mind. And eventually, I suppose, meditating on it, still going to work, engaging in my friendships, or, you know, just all the things that like keep you going, I eventually just saw a doorway. But I also know what created that was that choice element. Like, fierce self-compassion, which I should mention here at this point. Fierce self-compassion is this quality of kindness, but from a protecting, motivating, and providing intention. So this side of compassion is like, I want what's best for you. I know what you want, and I'm going to help you get that, or I'm going to protect you. In, just think of like a mama bear protecting her cub kind of thing. And yeah, it was just really like, you do have choice. Like, you have agency. You have more than what a lot of women around the world have, and or like your mothers before you have had. Like, the world is your oyster, and you have choice. And that wasn't a critical voice. That was really like on my own team, getting me through. So I'm not sure actually if that's answered your question.
It has.
Choice.
The thing that it makes me also realize is that you had your own back. And I think when you have your own back, you make choices, and some choices may not be the right choice, but they may be, you know, they're a part of life essentially, no matter what. But when you have your own back, you can see the doorway. And eventually you walk through it, even if it might take 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. But eventually you're like, okay, I have my back. And sometimes just getting to that place is actually really hard. And that's where, again, the compassion side actually really kicks in. It's like, I know what I need to do, and it might take me 5 minutes to actually do it, but I'm going to get there eventually. And it's every small step that we take, which is where the choice kicks in. And I think that's something I just want to elaborate a little bit on with our listeners, is that empowerment comes from choice. Empowerment really comes from knowing that you're not stuck. And whether it's a situation that's with somebody else involved or just for yourself, you do have a choice on what the next step is that you take. And I think when you know that you've got a choice, self-confidence also kicks in. So you actually feel like, again, you've got your back, you feel more confident in the decisions that you're making. And you know what, even if they don't turn out as you expected, that's where the circle keeps coming back and back, right? And I think having meditation, having compassion, these kind of tools available to you becomes your anchor. And that's something that, you know, I want you to share a little bit more in terms of the work that you actually do. You know, how firstly can the listeners connect with you in that space? But also, what does, a typical session look like with you? Because I think for our listeners who haven't really worked through a lot of compassion or haven't been in that space before, it may feel daunting, and it may feel like, hang on a second, but I was just trying to be kind to the other person or to that circumstance. However, are you creating the change that you really desire in your life? Or do you feel stuck? And, compassion is a way of helping you get unstuck.
Yeah, and I think if it's okay, something came to mind then when you were saying that. It was like we hadn't even kind of touched on the other half of compassion, which is the more tender side. And your question before was, what if people feel stuck? And I think in that tender side of compassion is actually to just validate, comfort, nurture, normalize what is going on for you at that time. And I don't want to overlook that, because having been in a place of feeling stuck, or like, this is how things are, you'll just have to get over it or keep going kind of thing, it is really important to at least just kind of validate that experience, and not necessarily just to push straight into the fears, because there's so much merit in being able to validate or comfort and normalize that. Because if you imagine, tension or this feeling of stuckness being like a really tight fist, this tender compassion just comes in underneath. It's like, yeah, okay, this is really hard. And after a little while, like, that fist just can't stay tense for long. It just can't. It's going to have to like melt into that support. You think about getting into a really nice warm bed at night, like, yeah, it
feels like a big cuddle, right? And it's sometimes a cuddle that you do need, but you need it from yourself.
That's it. And it's just like, all right, let's just validate what's going on, like the stuckness or this feeling of like, I don't have choice, or I don't know what to choose. Let's like validate that for a moment, and then we can move into the, all right, what's coming next? Because there's often such a push to have everything figured out, and there's just so much to be gained in giving yourself space, and that tender self-compassion side is so much space. So as far as like the work that I do, so at the moment I've been running one-on-one sessions, so essentially breaking up the mindful self-compassion program, which is typically 9 weeks, but I've actually lengthened it out to be 12, so that when I work one-on-one with someone, we really identify the parts of the program that are like most resonant with them. So a client that I've been working with recently, we've discovered that actually a lot of the source of their suffering is resistance, like that they're resisting reality. It's a lot of non-acceptance, when, funny enough, this person, when you meet them, they're just the kindest, most accepting, generous, like, but not towards themselves. So that's where we've kind of paused for a couple of weeks. And then along the ways we'll spend a lot of time working with inner criticism and eventually self-forgiveness as well. So these one-on-one sessions being over 12 weeks gives us a lot of space to just go where that client needs to go. So there's lots of areas that we cover, everything from how to navigate inner criticism, navigating forgiveness of ourselves and others, challenging relationships, difficult emotions, but there's also a lot of really light stuff in there in terms of how to embrace life through savoring and self-appreciation, all these things that we just, our modern way of living doesn't make time for, and then values alignment too. So there's just so much richness in it. It's not all about you have to be in a difficult place. Maybe you're in a really good place, but you'd like to amplify that, or get better at navigating the difficulties when they do inevitably come around, because again, shared human experience, we're going to all experience pain at some point. And so, that's a 12-week or 3-month program. Generally, I'll see people every week to kind of keep the momentum going. And so all of that information is available on my website. I run under a mindful mind, which, funny enough, the 3 pillars of that are acceptance, compassion, and curiosity. So,
love it.
A lot of alignment to this session.
And something I want to touch on with what you've just shared is we're not all struggling, right? And that's something, there are 2 bits that I want to look at it from, 2 lenses that I want to look at it from. Everything doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah.
And yes, there are moments that are going to be tough, but you know, on the bigger scheme of things, life can actually be enjoyable.
Yeah.
And if you're a person who is compassionate by nature and you just want to amplify, you know, the experience for others around you, you can be a leader of compassion in your community, whether it's at work or with, you know, your loved ones that, you know, have in your life. But I think when it comes to compassion, the reason it's actually a beautiful blessing is it does amplify your life.
Yeah.
It brings out so much goodness that we do get a chance to experience. You know, as you said, the moments that you're spending time with Billy at the beach and, you know, doing the things that you actually love are a result of the inner work that you've been doing. So I think, you know, some of this might seem a little bit heavy, but that's not the intent of what we're sharing in this conversation. It is really to help you say, okay, well, we all go through tough times. We all go through moments where it's like, hang on, I don't know how to deal with this. But then when you lean into the acceptance and the compassion, the outcome of it is actually self-love, amplified self-worth. That word was a bit of a hard one, but we're amplifying self-worth as well, right? During it. And what we're allowing or what we're empowering ourselves to achieve that way is a life that is filled with happiness.
Yeah, a meaningful life.
Yeah, a meaningful life and a happy life. There are going to be those ups and downs no matter what, but I think I want everyone to feel empowered and encouraged that these moments are moments. They're moments.
Yeah, of time.
And, you know, they are not the deciding factor of how the rest of your life can be, because life's a journey.
Yeah.
So we do get to decide on, you know, what choice we make next. But also, when you lean into compassion and acceptance, you can actually change how you respond to something the next time around. Because you won't necessarily always respond the same way as you have in the past. And I think, you know, that being said, if you have learnt about compassion, if you've been to one of your workshops, which I highly recommend because they are amazing, as Vivian's mentioned, the workshops that I've also been to are meditative, and there is breath work in there, which we're going to touch on slightly. But how do you then use that to become a leader?
So I think it's modeling what I know clinically, and having seen it in my own life, it's modeling. I think one of the biggest things that people, or qualms that they have around compassion, is it's just constant giving kind of thing. And actually, those who are most compassionate have the best boundaries. Like, they are equally compassionate to people and then to themselves. So they're not over giving or under. Like, there's no, and it's kind of this, I want to say, limitless source, because it's not taxing. Like, that's the thing with compassion. If it feels like you're running into burnout or empathy fatigue, I've heard those kinds of, and I just resent the idea of compassion fatigue because it doesn't exist. I know it feels like it, but actually when we learn what compassion is, how we practice it, there's no fatigue in that. But that's how we can be a leader, is firstly, just always coming back to this, everyone is inherently good. Everyone is, and I know some people will come at me for that, and I get that there is a very small population of humankind who have done some pretty awful things, which just pop them to one side. But everyone is inherently good and doing the best that they can. And when we model that, we give permission for other people to subscribe to that idea. I know in my own friendships, I've got a best friend of mine, and she always asks about other people, like, always is checking in, and she remembers things about conversations that she's had with them and just all these little details of their life. And I'm like, I'd like to start doing that. I'd like to remember things about people, right? Yes, we have what's called a negativity bias, but we sure as heck really like to also feed off what's really good in other people. And compassion is that too, that I see you, I hear you, and I'm here for you with whatever it is that you need, like in the capacity that I can give. I am here for you. I suppose modeling that, you know, and calling out when things are not compassionate or not okay, and setting a really good scene.
I love that, because hence this podcast, right? Connecting women who break barriers. And that's what it's all about. It's like, we can be a role model of the things that we know we're good at, but also in sharing that is how we extend the knowledge to people who may not have knowledge in that space, but then also they can see other role models within the community that are doing things that feel exciting, that look exciting, that are amazing 100%, and you're like, how is she doing it? I want to know more. It's like, you know, that thing of I'll have what she's having type scenario. Why not?
Yeah, why not you?
We're all worthy of having a great life, and if we're teaching and learning from each other, I think that's the best gift that we can give to each other. So being a role model definitely resonates with me, and I love that answer, so thank you for sharing.
And on being a role model, I've one of the clients that I work with, she's moved from another country. Unfortunately, she lost her husband about a year ago, or maybe a little bit more, and has moved halfway across the world to be with her son. And just watching her embrace everything with what's called beginner's mind, this idea that we're never the expert, there's always room to learn. You know, drop the bravado, drop the ego kind of thing. We all have so much to learn from one another, and I just wanted to share that little tidbit on her because she's always sending me these awesome videos where I can learn more, which essentially gives me more to give to the people I work with, and it's just sharing. So I suppose I just want to highlight beginner's mind and just what a gift that can be if we adopt a beginner's mindset versus, well, I know everything there is to know.
Yeah, 100%.
And just sharing it.
And also sometimes we get stuck in our perspective of how things should be or can be, and it's like, but when you listen to, you know, how someone else may be doing it, I'm not saying that you're going to resonate 100%, but there's always at least one aha moment, and you actually haven't thought about it that way. But I love how Vivian just shared that with me, and now I can actually implement it in my life as well, and it will make a difference. And that's our intention with this conversation as well, is to help you make a small difference in your life in whatever way that's possible for you, so that you can then be a leader of joy and empathy and kindness in the world, and we continue to spread it forward. So on that note, one thing that I really like about you, and I just want to share, for me, the warmth that I get from you every single time we connect is something that I know is coming from your heart. And for that, thank you. I really appreciate that. And you know what? I can feel the compassion and kindness like kind of oozing out of you. And you're like someone else who I really love seeing. Every time I see her, she's got a smile on, and like, you probably can't tell what's going on underneath. And it's hard when you're a people person and you're always giving and giving, and you're like, hang on, but I need a minute for myself. But you never seem to waver that giving kindness, you know, side of yourself. So I know that a lot of our listeners would be able to resonate if they've been to a class of yours. And that's why I wanted to have you, because my intent with this is to connect women who are encouraging. You know, as Vivian so kindly shared what she's been through recently, we are all going through something, but that doesn't mean that we can't have each other's back.
Yeah.
And that's something that you've always done, even offline when we've, you know, spoken or we've not been in a class together. It's always a matter of like, we end our conversations on a positive note, and we're actually sharing. You know, we're sharing what we've been through, and I think that is something that I appreciate about you as well, because I've been able to do the same. For me, being vulnerable has been a little bit challenging because that's not something I grew up with. So I thank you for giving me the space to be open and sharing with you. And I'd love for our listeners to connect with you and come to work with you one-on-one, or come to a workshop in some form or another. Is there any other ways that they can also connect with you, and how would you like to connect with them?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump in there and just say my own thanks. You can't move me along that quickly. There was something that you had shared with me around, I'm fairly certain you'd shared it with me personally, around that, like, getting on camera was like really hard and kind of daunting. Like, it was just something you were like, I don't really like to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I was like, yes, go you, because it is really scary and a bit daunting. And I certainly had felt the same way. I'm like, every time I jump on camera, to record something, I do like 10 takes, and I think just hearing your experience, I'm like, oh, I'm not alone. Like, and so let's just all be each other's cheerleaders. Like, it's just, if what you're putting out is only there to benefit other people, like, we're all on the same team. Like, it's just, so no, thank you for having me.
Of course. It's been great.
Sharing all those really nice things. If people are listening, they won't see that I'm blushing, but I am. So people can follow me along on either Instagram. As of probably when this podcast comes out, I'll be out of my little cocoon, taking a bit of time away, and just sharing reels and whatnot, bits and pieces. So I'm at a mindful mind with little underscores in between, or I'm a mindfulmind.com.au. That's where you can find all of my services on there. And I'm also running Atlas Retreat. It's this April 25th to the 28th. There's actually one room left, so if you would like to come and join and learn a lot more about self-compassion, there will be 5 modules taught, and there's also a nice range of movement practice. I've got an art therapist coming down. She's got something super exciting planned. We've also got yin and pin, and just like, it is... Yes, there'll be some elements of like work, but if you don't want to do that, that's okay. You can sit by the pool or like just do all of the other stuff. Like, it is quite literally a self-compassion break, and you take what you need from it and go home just a lighter bit.
Awesome. And we will be dropping Vivian's details in the show notes. Thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you for sharing so openly. I'm sure we would have all learned something. Just before we quickly sign off, is there any key takeaways that you want to share with the audience?
I would really like it, being your audience being majority women, so I'll address women. I would really love it if women could just see themselves the way that those who are closest to them and have their best interests at heart see them. Like, it is never too late to start being on your own side. It's never too late to actually start treating yourself nicely. It's also not self-indulgent. It's not sissy. It's none of those things that others are probably going to project onto you, and that's for them to worry about. My biggest takeaway would be is that, you are your priority. You have one life. How do you want to live it? And you have one body, one mind, one soul. Make that the most meaningful relationship you have in your lifetime, because you're going to be in it until the very end. So you may as well make it meaningful and happy.